carried on. On July 8th, the former Prime Minister of Japan, Shinzo Abe, was shot by a bystander while his speech, and this was really shocking, and this was really tragedy in Japan. So regarding the case that Shinzo Abe was killed by a bystander, police executives were pursued for responsibility for deficiency of security precaution, and they got disciplinary action one after another. The commissioner of National Police Agency of Japan stepped down to take responsibility for this case. In the same way, the chief of Nara Prefectural Police Headquarters stepped down to take responsibility for this case in response to disciplinary action. So considering these internal affairs of Japanese police organization, I have my opinion about how Japan's police organization should be. So conclusively, I think the National Police Agency as police headquarters of Japan that control the domestic police administration should separate the police officers as a police administrators and a police officer as law enforcing officer. So to explain what I mean here, firstly, I'm just going to have to explain the structure of Japan's police organization. So the National Police Agency is Japan's administrative agency in charge of planning the police system and police management concerning the domestic security and supervision of each regional police headquarters around Japan. And the National Police Agency is a subordinate organization of the National Police Safety Commission of Japan. So this National Public Safety Commission of Japan supervises the National Police Agency of Japan and makes the outline of police management policy. So prefectural police headquarters are located in each prefecture in Japan, and law enforcement authority is delegated to each prefectural police headquarters with a certain discretion. But in contrast to the structure of police organization system in the United States, like the state police uniquely has a big authority, big privilege and discretion, as it's not easy for the United States government itself to interfere internal affairs of the state police without FBI given privilege to investigate across the state. So Japan's regional police headquarters are fully controlled and supervised by the National Police Agency. And the amount of discretion that each prefectural police headquarters has is adjusted uniformly by the National Police Agency of Japan. And Japan's police organization adopts quite rigid top-down hierarchical system. So prefectural police headquarters, including the Metropolitan Police Department of Japan as a Tokyo Regional Police Department, or even a subordinate organization of the National Police Agency of Japan. So from here, I will just explain the personnel system of Japan's police organization. So police officers in Japan are roughly classified into two types, which are police officer as a police administrator called courier in Japanese, and police officer as a law enforcing officer called non-courier in Japanese. So a police officer as a police administrator belongs to the National Police Agency, and a police officer as a law enforcing officer belongs to the prefectural police police headquarters. So those two types of police officers are applied to the same police class system. So basically, the types of police class applied to police enforcement officers are basically constable, and sergeant, and assistant inspector, and inspector and superintendent. And the types of police class applied to a police administrator are senior superintendent, and superintendent supervisor, and superintendent general. So new police personnel accepted as an administrator by the National Police Agency of Japan basically starts from the assistant inspector, but they are not local law enforcement officer, but an administrator at the Japanese government official. Of course, there's a quite rare case that there was some police officers that climb up from the constable to the superintendent supervisor. So the relationship between a police administrator and a law enforcement police officer is pretty much the same as the relationship between the private soldier or non-commissioned military officer and commissioned military officer. Furthermore, a police officer as a law enforcement officer is a local government official, and a police officer as an administrator, a police administrator is a Japanese government official. So the social position of these two types of police officers is quite discriminated. But the role of these two types of police officer is not unified like the roles of non-commissioned military officers and commissioned military officer. In case of Army, the role of commissioned officer is obviously on the extension of the private soldiers or non-commissioned military officers, in a sense of relationship between soldiers and the commander. But in case of Japan's police system, the role of police administrator and the role of law enforcing officers is quite different in the police work. A police administrator is rather in charge of legislation and domestic police administration than giving direction to law enforcement officers that belong to a local police department. And law enforcement officers are in charge of field work, such as traffic crackdown and investigation and municipal procedures. So the degree of difference in the role between a police administrator and law enforcing officers is equivalent to that between the personnel of the Department of Defense of the United States and the soldiers of military organizations like Navy, Army, and Marine or something like that. So the chief of Nara Prefectural Police headquarters as a superintendent who stepped down to take responsibility for the case that Abe was killed was in the post of police chief of Nara Prefecture in the form of being transferred from the National Police Agency temporarily until expiration of his term. So substantially, police officers as an on-the-spot director are the executives of law enforcing officers in Nara Prefectural Police. So putting it simply, it is like the Department of Defense of transfers its high officials with no experience to command squad or command troops to a regiment of the army as a commander. So you might understand how weird it is. The post of chief of prefectural police headquarters exists just as a temporary post for making police administrators experience in order to plan and formulate a good legislative bill and consider good police administration when they return back to the National Police Agency of Japan. So it is not exaggeration to say the chief of prefectural police headquarters is just an amateur of local police administration. So how could how could they be familiar with local police administration for even just a couple years during the term? So after all, BIP protection and security plan were made by police administrators who don't even know much about local police administration and and who have almost no experience in law enforcement law enforcement officer. So there's a fatal structural problem in the Japanese police. So as I said in the beginning, that's why the National Police Agency has to separate a police officer as a police administrator and a police officer as a law enforcing officer completely. Like police personnel applied to police class system is just limited to a just law enforcing police officer and empower them to be able to command the local police administrations. And the National Police Agency should abandon the police class system applied to police administrators. So police administrators just have to concentrate on legislation or domestic police administration, while they get support from the law enforcing officers in a prefectural police headquarters. So if needed, they just make the law enforcement officers in charge of local police administration transfer to a national police agency in order to receive a good advice from them for legislation or something. So I think the deficiency of security precaution happening in the case that Abe was killed was basically attributed to the structural problem of Japan's police organization rather than it was just a man-made problem.